Hello, this podcast is based on the project of Women Founders of Sociology. This podcast will be given by myself, Helen, and Miriam. We are all Erasmus students. In this podcast, we will be talking about Marion Weber, Max Weber, George Simmel, and Ferdinand Tournier. They were all put together for this podcast because they are all German, they knew each other, they were friends of each other, but they also criticized each other's work. We have actually an interesting fact. Marianne Weber and George Simmel criticized also one another's work. George Simmel wrote actually that the women have emotional knowledge and that the men were capable to have rational knowledge. Marianne Weber wrote something as a response to his theory. So during this podcast, I will be talking about Marianne Weber. Then we've got Miriam who will talk about Max Weber, and Helen is going to talk about George Simmel and Ferdinand Tournier. So let's start with Marianne Weber. She was a German sociologist, a women's rights activist, and also a feminist. Let's talk about her early life. Marianne Weber was born in Oerlinghausen on the 2nd of August 1870, and she died on March 12th of 1954. Marianne Weber was the daughter of Anna Weber and Edward Schnitger. Anna Weber came from a wealthy family, and she was the daughter of a linen manufacturer, and Edward Schnitger was, just a common doctor. The parents of Anna didn't want her to marry Edward, but they did, and Marianne was born. And then during the second pregnancy of Anna Weber, she actually died. So Marianne grew up without parents. Even though her father was alive, he was never around. She actually grew up with her grandmother, so her grandmother from her father's side. And at the age of 16, her grandfather from her mother's side sent her to study. She was a very ambitious girl, and she really wanted to become someone in her life during her life. After her grandmothers from her father's side died, she went ahead and lived with Helen Weber. Helen Weber was someone from her mother's side, and she actually became very, very close to Helen Weber. She didn't want to be around her father's side of the family because her father was insane and also her uncles were insane. So being with Helen Weber and her family really helped Marianne a lot. And so there is where she actually also met Max Weber. Max Weber was one of her cousins. They met each other and they became very close to one another, and they married to one another. Max Weber was a professor of economics at Freiburg, and he also was a professor of political science. Marianne Weber, she went to a few classes of Max Weber, and there she actually got a lot of feminist ideas. Marianne Weber was a feminist, but she also participated on the women's movement, and it was something that she really enjoyed doing. She co-founded a society advocating feminist thoughts together with her husband, Max Weber, and they also played actually a big role on raising the number of female students attending the university. They both thought that it was very important for women also to be schooled because it would help them further in life. But Max Weber started dealing with a mental illness, and he wasn't capable of being around as much as he was before. And during 7 years, he became less of a public figure, and Marianne Weber took all of his tasks. So she was participating in politics, and she became a very well known. Now, on to her status and relationship with Max Weber. So, her status in society was raising, and she was an intellectual and a scholar. She established an intellectual salon where they had weekly meetings. Werner Sommer, George Simmel, and feminist Marianne Bohm were some of the names of the people who joined her intellectual salon, and during the Nazi regime, they actually weren't allowed to meet, but they found a place where they still could meet in secret with each other and share their thoughts about everything. She published different works, The Question of Divorce, Authority and Autonomy in Marriage, Woman and Objective Culture, and so on. And now on to the status with Max Weber. So publicly, they had a really great status. They were a good couple. They seemed to have everything. They were smart. They seemed to be happy. But Max Weber was actually cheating. He had an affair with one of their closest friends, and Marianne Weber knew about this. She didn't leave him. She stayed with him, and it is said that they might have had an open relationship. I mean, I think Marianne Weber was really in love with Max Weber despite him cheating on her, because she also wrote a bibliography of Max Weber after he died, and she was really devastated when Max Weber died. The most known works of Marianne Weber are the works where she actually wrote about patriarchal societies and also about marriage. But the patriarchal societies are societies controlled or government controlled by men. And she really wanted to show that actually men were also paid more than women at the time, and men are still being paid more than women at this time. Marianne wanted to know the payment difference between gender, and she studied how much a German woman at the time, gained by being in the workforce and working outside of the house. She used statistics to show how the man was being paid more than the women. She said that gender-based power dynamics are changing within the household, and she really wanted to see a payment difference for women at the time as well. Max criticized Marianne's work. I think they really used to criticize one another's work just to make each other better. And now on to another work she did. So she wrote, she actually went to America and met Jane Addams and Florence Kelley, which are also very well-known sociologists and women's rights activists. And there she got the idea to write a book, Wife and Mother in Development of Law. It was an analysis about marriage. So she was devoted to the analysis of the institution of marriage. Her conclusion was that marriage is a complex and an ongoing negotiation over power and intimacy, in which money, women's work, and sexuality are key issues. Another theme in her work was that women's work could be used to map and explain the constitution and reproduction of the social person and the social work. To end Marianne Weber's part of the podcast, we will think about her economical point of view. Her book, Wife and Mother in the Development of Law, there she collected the legal, economic, and social status of women. She collected works and documents about them, and she also saw the women as a great factor to everyday economy. And now I will let Mariam talk about Max Weber.
So, hi everyone. You have learned about Marianne Weber, and I want to tell you about her husband Max Weber, who also has a great impact on modern sociology and economy. And he's considered to be the father of modern sociology because he always tried to reorientate sociology, but not only sociology, also political sciences, also economy, even religion. And we, of course, gonna come back to this and speak about that more and more when we speak about his works. But now I just want to tell you a bit about his childhood and where's his family from, and In this picture on the right side, you can see Max Weber. He's the one on the left. In the middle is his brother, and on the right side is the sister. He was born on 21st of April in 1864 in Prussian city of Erfurt, and full name was Maximilian Karl Emil Weber. Both his parents came from a good family. They had a good family background. His father came from a family of merchants and industrialists, and his father continued his career later on as a textile businessman, and he was also actively involved in economy and law. And his mother came from the family of Huguenot line, and the members of Huguenot line family were good academicians and public servants. It's a proof that his family were actively involved in culture, in economy, and this couldn't impact him because Max was extremely clever child. And to prove this, I want to tell you a story. When he was 14 years old, he wrote 2 articles and gave them to his parents as a Christmas gift. And the articles are called About the Course of German History, with special reference to the positions of the emperor and the pope. And the other one is called About the Roman imperial period from Constantine to the migration of nations. And when you think about that, even saying the names is already hard enough. And for a 14-year-old child to be able to cover these topics and speak about this so deeply is something not everyone can do. Even the adults can do it sometimes. But he was that clever to be able to write this. And if you look at his thoughts and methodology, you can see the reflection of Goethe's work for 40 volumes. He really enjoyed reading this. And I remember reading a story that he always read that during his classes in school because sometimes he found the classes boring. The reason is because he was so clever that he understood everything beforehand, and he didn't really enjoy the classes, so he read. But his childhood wasn't always nice. The worst part is that his parents had an ongoing conflict of both of identity, which affected him throughout his life. And I will tell you more about this when I speak about his education and about his marriage. First of all, let's have a look at his education. He went to university in 1882, University of Heidelberg, but he had to leave the university because of military service. And after 1 year of military service, he came back, and on 1883 he went to University of Berlin. He studied law, and alongside with his studies, he worked as a lawyer. For what he didn't get paid, but he enjoyed doing this. In 1886, he passed his examination of referenda. Referenda is a bar association for law students. It's very important. And then in 1889, he received his law degree by writing a dissertation on a legal history, and he called his dissertation The History of Commercial Partnership in the Middle Ages. In 1891, he received his PhD and joined the University of Berlin, lecturing and consulting for the government, and he was very successful in this. He was giving speeches alongside with politicians, with economists. He were actively involved in these topics, and everyone knew him. And that's the reason that in 1894 he got a call from Freiburg University with a work suggestion. And after 2 years, in 1896, he went back to Heidelberg University doing his professorship there. He got married in 1893 with Mariana Schnittke, and she played a big role in his life because after his father's sudden death in 1897, Max collapsed with a nervous breakdown and had to terminate his career. His relationship to his father wasn't good because he always tried to support his mother when his parents were having conflicts. He always took his mother's side, and he was not able to make up the relationship with his father before his death. So when he died, Max Weber collapsed, and Mariana was the one who supported him during this period, and she was the one who collected all his work and published them all in journals. So we should really be thankful for that. He terminated his career, but after a long time, he was able to do it again. Of course, not fully, but he was still involved in everything, in economy, in politics, everything what interested to him. Okay, now let's go on and speak about his two very important works. The first one is Economy and Society, and this is considered to be the most important work of 20th century in sociology, in sociological work, because this book covers topics like religion, economics, politics, public administration, and of course sociology. And he speaks about each of these topics detailed, clearly explaining his thoughts and giving some connection between all of this. And this brings us to the next book, the Protestant Ethic and Spirit of Capitalism. This is considered to be the founding milestone of economic sociology, because he explains in details why capitalism exists, and he says that capitalism is a result of Protestant work ethic. And in this book as well, he tried to speak about religion and economy and work. And in 20th century, it was the time of industrialization, and many people started their companies trying to get more money and hard work. And he always says that in this Protestant work ethic was so beneficial because it describes the hard work that people do. And this book is mainly speaking about economy, but also reflecting sociological aspects in it. And these are maybe the most famous books from Max Weber that have a great impact on, still have a great impact on sociology and economy. Now when we spoke about him being actively involved in economy and also writing a book about economy, I want to show you the most important thing that he left us. And let's talk about the bureaucratical model. This is bureaucratical model is still used even nowadays in organizational culture, and Max Weber had 6 clear points explaining the bureaucratical model and what was the perfect organizational structure for him. The first one is hierarchical structure. That means that once the high levels control the below levels, and rule-based management. It's like that everyone has knows the rules, and everyone has to go by the rules, and there are decisions made by the management. The next point is functional specialty organization. It's that everyone is a specialist, every worker is a specialist doing the job that he's best at. And then it's the up-focused mission of organization. If the mission of organization is to serve the stakeholders, the board, or any other agency that empowered it, then it is up-focused. So he thought that this is the best way for the organization to be up-focused. And the fifth point is impersonal. With impersonal, he meant that every employee should be considered equally. And this brings us to the last point, employment based on technical qualifications. It meant selections as well as the promotion of employees is based on technical qualifications and skills. And if you consider the last 2 points, impersonal employment based on technical qualification, he wanted to show that it doesn't matter how a person looks like or what kind of gender the person has. Important is that he or she is good at the work and he can do it and he can follow the rules. Of course, this bureaucratical model was also criticized, but it is still alive and some organizations still use this. I was happy to tell you about Max Weber, his career and his works, and now Helena will tell you more about other sociology economics.
Hello, my name is Helene and I'm going to present to you George Simmel. George Simmel was born in Berlin on March 1st, 1858, as the youngest of 7 children. He was a German sociologist and philosopher. He was one of the founders of formal sociology. The aim of formal sociology is to reveal that although the process of social interaction may be very complex, the social forms of these interactions can be isolated and may even be found to be identical. He is also considered one of the main proponents of the philosophy of life. His father was a businessman. His family was Jewish and converted to Christianity. When George was still a little boy, his father died and he left him with quite a large inheritance. This inheritance allowed him to go to college. He studied philosophy and history at the University of Berlin. Simmel's wide interests in philosophy, sociology, arts, and religion contrasted sharply with those of his more narrowly disciplined colleagues. In 1819, he married Gertrude Kinnel. She was also an academic. He became a professor as a profession because of his fascinating lecturing style on problems of logic, ethics, aesthetics, sociology of religion, social psychology, and sociology. His lectures were very popular. They were even announced in the newspapers, and many young intellectuals took lectures from him. At that time, all teachers wanted to be the best because they got paid for the amount of students they had in their classes. So, as I mentioned before, was George Simmel the founder of the formal sociology. Formal sociology is a scientific approach to sociology developed by George Simmel, but also by Leopold von Wiese. Formal sociology is defined as a branch of sociology concerned with the modes of recurrent social relationships, such as competition, division of labor, supraordination, and subordination, that are conceived to exist in any type of human association. Unlike his contemporaries, such as Max Weber, who mainly focused their attention on macro-sociological phenomena, he focused on the micro level of social interactions. The Chicago Women's School focused their attention also on the macro-sociological phenomena. George Simmel was also often criticized by Marianne Weber, the woman of Max Weber. In his studies, Simmel focused more on types of social interaction more than on the content of these interactions. This is why this approach to sociology was called formal sociology. In formal sociology, one formal concept can be used in order to explain and understand different events. The purpose of formal sociology is to reveal that although the process of social interaction can be quite complex, the social forms of these interactions can be isolated and may even prove to be identical. In 1900, he published a comprehensive study, The Philosophy of Money. This work can still be seen as a standard philosophical work on money and its social impact on man, law, religion, and economy. So the books he wrote are still relevant for nowadays. So that was my presentation about George Simmel. The next sociologist I'm going to present to you is Ferdinand Tönnies. Ferdinand Tönnies is a sociologist and economist born on July 26, 1855 in Aldersworth. He died in 1936 at almost 81 years of age. Ferdinand was a significant link in the development of social theory and field studies. We know him especially for his differentiations between community and society. So let's move on to the biography. Ferdinand Tönnies was born into a family which were wealthy farmers. He was the only sociologist of his time to be born into a farmer family. At home, they were 7 children. In 1872, he went to the University of Strasbourg in France and then to the University of Tübingen, where he received a doctorate in philology. His main interests at that time, though, were social issues and political philosophy. Tönnies, who was conservative by nature, was still quite actively involved in the socialist and trade union movements and in a variety of other progressive movements. He supported several independence movements. He investigated the war debt issue after the war. In protest against the emergent National Socialist movement, he joined the Social Democratic Party in his country. This and his public disapproval of the Nazism led to being fired by the Hitler government from his position as a professor emeritus in 1933. After years of studying, Ferdinand became a teacher at the University of Kiel. As a teacher at his university, in 1881, he created a theory. Tönnies' theory is often called the Gemeinschaft-Gesellschaft dichotomy in German. Gemeinschaft-Gesellschaft means community and society. This means that they are contradictory concepts at the opposite ends of a spectrum. This is an important aspect of the theory because each side plays a crucial role in forming or defining the other side, and that their relationship is inseparable. So, on the one hand, we have the word community. Community is a term that refers to individuals who are connected by common standards, often because of a shared physical area and shared beliefs. The equilibrium in community is achieved through means of social control, such as morality, conformism, and exclusion. It can be historically imaged by a family or even a neighborhood in a pre-modern rural society. So, on the other hand, we have the word society. Society refers to societies in which self-interest is a primary reason for membership. Society maintains its balance through police, laws, tribunals, and even prisons. It can be imaged by a limited company or maybe a state in a modern society. So this is like the society in which Ferdinand Tönnies lived. We've come to the end of our podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you for your attention.